In today's video, the City of Toronto has officially removed minimum parking requirements for new residential developments. What does that mean and how does that impact the Toronto condo market and obviously the value of parking? Let's get to it. Hello everyone, this is Sam from SaberiSixRealEstate and Remax Realtron Realty. As always, back with another video for you guys here today. You can find my contact information in terms of my Gmail, my office information, and my Instagram in the description box. Feel free to get in touch with me with any questions you may have with regards to any topics covered in this video, any topics covered in previous videos, or if you have any general inquiries whatsoever with regards to the Toronto/GTA real estate market. As a last point, before we get into the point of today's video, as always, as I say, feel free to subscribe, comment, rate, and review, but you're not obliged to do so, as I always say that part as well, to the dismay of a lot of people in the comments, but feel free to subscribe if you wish. Anyways, enough of that. Let's get to the point of today's video, which off the bat on the top I said is with regards to removal of the minimum requirement for parking spots with regards to new residential developments, often obviously condominium developments. As is the case historically since roughly 2012 or around 2013, there exists mandatory minimum requirements for any residential development with regards to parking, meaning developers developing within the municipality of Toronto had to abide up to this point with regards to that minimum requirement for parking with regards to the residential developments. Once again, most often condominium. This was obviously done to ensure that there was ample parking for a very much so growing interconnected city. Obviously, the City of Toronto is a different municipality technically than, for instance, let's say Peel in terms of Mississauga or York Region in terms of Richmond Hill. But at the end of the day, the GTA is very much so interconnected. And putting technicalities aside, people use the term Toronto to really stand for the entirety of the GTA. People from Vaughan equally consider themselves from Toronto as people from Midtown Toronto to North York to Etobicoke to Scarborough to even certain cases, you know, in terms of the west side of the GTA. As a result, the expanding city, the GTA, became very much so interconnected, and that purported a heavy reliance on vehicular travel, like most modern cities. Well, now the City of Toronto is doing away through an amendment with the minimum requirements. The city announced recently that they're adopting a new zoning bylaw amendment that will do away with these minimum parking requirements for new residential construction. Not only are they doing away with the minimum requirement, they're actually going to adopt new zoning bylaws that are going to limit the number of parking. So in a sense, they're actually doing away with a minimum requirement and they're imposing a maximum requirement of sorts. And in reality, this actually allows developers to once again, as long as they adhere to the maximum requirement, to build parking spaces as they see fit based on purely demand side of things, right? Once again, up to this point, if the developer thought that they're building too many parking spaces and there won't be enough demand for the amount of parking spaces they're building for their new residential condominium development, they had no choice but to do it anyways, because even if they believe that there won't be enough demand for the number of parking units that they're constructing, if that number was below the minimum requirements, they had to build it anyways. They had no choice but to go ahead and build that many units if that many units was below the minimum requirement. So this, without a doubt, provides more autonomy to developers to build, once again, however many units they see fit in terms of how they're reading the demand side of things for their particular projects. We'll touch on that a bit more later in terms of my final thoughts. Now, before we get into some of the numbers in terms of the value of parking and how, in my opinion, this will impact the value of parking, the purported reasons for this measure is mainly threefold, right? It has to do with a green initiative, affordability, and equitable housing. Now, the last two are kind of obviously interconnected. The belief in the argument for the green initiative side of things in terms of building a greener and less polluted city is that this measure, on top of other measures, obviously will diminish the heavy usage of vehicles, and in fact, minimum requirements for new housing developments with regards to condominiums mostly promotes a further reliance on vehicles and cars, and thus as a result, when you do away with the minimum requirement on top of other measures, you're once again diminishing the heavy reliance and usage of cars, and as a result, that's going to lead to a more greener city in terms of emissions. In terms of the affordability, the argument here follows as such, wherein developers, when they build condominiums, for instance, high rises to mid rises, the deeper they have to build in terms of parking levels, so all the way from P1 to P4, the pricier it becomes in terms of the costs that the developer has to take on, and as a result, they pass those costs down to the consumer. And this is always reflected in the numbers, right? A condominium, whether we're talking about resale or pre-con, a condominium with a parking spot costs far more, anywhere from $50,000 to even $125,000 more than a condominium without a parking spot. And that's just in terms of the market value of the parking, right? When the developer has to build the parking spot, they take on more costs, and the argument is they pass on the costs to you. And in terms of, once again, the equitable, that's pretty much connected to the affordability. But the argument there is that lower income households don't really use vehicles. As a result, it's unequitable when we create a city in terms of minimum requirements. We're not accounting for their needs as such, because vehicles and cars in terms of transportation is mainly a middle to higher class thing, and the lower income households don't really have that dependency in terms of vehicular transportation. But those are the arguments that are put forth in favor of this removal of the minimum requirements. But how will this impact the condominium market and the value of parking at large within the city of Toronto? Well, let's first start, before we get really deep into the numbers, let's start with looking at how much a parking spot goes for as is now in 2021. So just so you have a good understanding, let's look at some of the sold parking spots within the last calendar year. So from January of 2021 until year to date, December 19th of 2021. Here, as you can see, this is just with regards to the city of Toronto. And from this map, you see the main thrust of the parking spots are located in southern central Toronto, so in C1, C8, some in E1 and E2, but mostly, once again, in C1 and C8. You do have within central areas more solds. Obviously, it goes all the way up to C14 and C6, some in W10, but once again, the main thrust is mainly in downtown Toronto, and after that, obviously, in central Toronto, generally speaking. So once we go a little bit in and zoom into the map, and obviously these red dots are overlapping listings, right? The map is a little too zoomed out for them to show individually. But we see, once again, yes, here in the downtown core, these are all the sold parking spots within the last year. For instance, here we have a sold spot for $99,000, $95,000, but those are the higher end ones, right? Here you see one for $53,000, for instance, and then you have some in the 40s here throughout the duration of the year. And that's what parking spots on an individual basis, as you can see, can go for in downtown. Now, a lot of variables obviously impact the price of parking in downtown Toronto, right? As you can see, some were sold for, once again, $99,000, some for lower price points around the 40s in the 50s. Now, obviously, I didn't go through all the transactions that occurred in 2021, but with regards to all the transactions in terms of sold parking spots that occurred in 2021 within the municipality of Toronto, the average selling price came in at $45,000 based upon 43 sold parking spots. As you saw, that ranged all the way from northwestern Toronto to downtown Toronto to North York up by Steeles. Now, if we were to just look at downtown exclusively, C1 and C8, the average bumps up about $4,000 to $49,000. And by the way, the medians here are relatively close to the average. In fact, I believe the medians for both downtown sold prices and Toronto at large sold prices are exactly at the average sold prices, within a couple of $100s. So it shows you that the range of data is not that expansive, and it's not like obviously real estate where you have luxury properties and lower end properties. Yes, you do have a range. As we saw, some parking spots sold for $93,000, some sold for $47,000. The share of solds in terms of the $50,000-$40,000 range make up far more. Now, what's interesting is that the value of parking has dipped year over year, where in 2020, the average price of a parking spot in the city of Toronto at large was around $52,000 in terms of average sold price, with the median being a little bit further off at $47,000. Now, once again, if we minimize our scope and just look at downtown Toronto, as we did with the year 2021, and do the same for 2020, we see a even larger dip, wherein the average value of parking really in downtown Toronto in 2020 was $61,000. So going from $61,000 to $49,000, that is not anything inconsequential. It's actually quite material in terms of the drop in value in parking. But now, and let us use this as a transition to get into my thoughts, my professional opinions and final thoughts. But now with this new measure, parking, in my frank estimate, is going to become even more of a scarce commodity. Of course, once again, as I presented the numbers, there was a dip from 2020 to 2021. However, if we take a look at before 2020, so for instance, starting at 2016 to 2017 to 2018 to 2019, it has been a consecutive and gradual increase in the value of parking, particularly with regards to some of the most central areas in the city of Toronto. So historically speaking, parking just by itself, appreciates. And with this new measure, I do believe that parking is going to become more of a scarce commodity in the coming years. And thus, as a result, it's more important than ever to purchase a unit with a parking spot, particularly with regards to the city of Toronto. Longtime viewers of this channel know how bullish and keen I am on parking spots. And this is, by the way, putting aside the end user perspective, right? If you have a car, you love vehicles, you have to travel every day to work, take the 401 or the 404, naturally you're gonna need a car, right? But let's just say you are someone who doesn't even need a car, you're just purely an investor. Well, even in that instance, purely from an investor's perspective, I believe parking spots are going to become more valuable than ever, and particularly with regards to the city of Toronto. To add on to this, when we looked at parking spot prices in this video, it was just parking spot prices exclusively with regards to the spot itself, right? I just want to clarify that when we look at units with parking versus units without parking, so taking two exact units that are precisely the same in every way, shape, or form, obviously the only difference would be in that instance that one is a higher floor, one is a lower floor, but same exposure, same layout, same finishings inside the unit, same square footage. The unit with parking always sell for more than the unit without the parking. And frankly, with regards to the reasons provided as to why this measure is being put forth, I'm quite suspicious. In fact, I do believe that this is going to benefit developers far more than it's going to benefit consumers. Now, if I was going to be conspiratorial, I would assume that this was a measure kind of pushed forward by developers in order for them to save costs so they don't have to adhere to minimum requirements that are causing these expenses. And they're pushing it in terms of, in a sense, being beneficial to the consumer, whereas it's actually beneficial to the developer. But I'm not going to quite go that far in terms of how cynical I'll be about the situation. But at the end of the day, that does not change the actual material results that this will have. This will favor developers more, and historically speaking, developers in real estate and in most instances in every sector of business, manufacturers, developers, corporations, they're not really known to pass on the savings onto the consumer. I mean, it is possible, but I find it very hard to believe that due to this removal of minimum requirements, the developers will save expenses and thus as a result pass on those savings in terms of lower per square foot prices to the consumer. I don't believe that will happen. Anyways, let me know your thoughts. I'm actually quite curious what most people, most viewers of this channel think. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Let me know if you have any further questions with regards to any topics covered in this video. And you can find my contact info for those questions in the description box. Feel free to get in touch. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, found it informative, feel free to subscribe, give it a like and comment. And yeah, stay safe. Thank you very much.